And welcome to Crime Time. This is Crime Time podcast episode number 69. I'm Dr. Steve Albrecht, and I'm joining you from Springfield, Missouri. For this episode, we'll be talking about cybercrime and some new and disturbing issues coming out of the cybercrime world, which are really affecting things like healthcare and hospitals, and not only libraries and other places that seem to be getting attacked more recently, but also a concern that we have about the power grids and the power system involving not only vandalism, but the possibility of some attacks on the cyber security that is used to run our electrical power grids, our water stations, our wastewater treatment plants, things like that. So we'll be talking about that today for this half hour. So thanks for listening to Crime Time, where we talk about crime and crooks and cops and personal security. We'll talk about some dangerous people and lots of heroes, and we'll even mention a few stupid crooks every episode. Most importantly, I'll talk about what you can do to keep yourself and your family safe from crime and violence. As always, you need to be vigilant at home and in your neighborhood and in your community, and at school if you go there, or at work, or even on the road. This show exists to make you feel more empowered, more secure, and more educated on security issues and on the criminal justice system. As background, I worked for the San Diego Police Department for 15 years as a patrol officer, reserve sergeant, domestic violence investigator. I now work as a training consultant I teach training workshops focusing on human resources, employee coaching, workplace violence, and security issues in the workplace. I've written 25 books on business and workplace violence and leadership, and on police subjects and on firearms, all of which you can find on Amazon at my author's page. Just look up Steve Albrecht. Don't get me confused with the W. Steve Albrecht, who is the tax guy from BYU. That's not me. So I'm in there on leadership, service, firearms, criminal justice, safety, security, those types of things on Amazon. You can always reach me at my website, which is crimetimeradio.com. You can send me an email. You can connect with me on Twitter at Dr. Steve Albrecht. So that's at DR and then Steve and then my last name Albrecht. Or you can get me at LinkedIn, same way, at Dr. Steve Albrecht. You can always find past episodes, the previous 60 plus past episodes of Crime Time on YouTube. And thanks for taking a look at those. So let's define a couple things here in terms of our language for cybersecurity and cyber issues. Let's look at some of the most common types of cyber things that happen to you as a personal consumer or as somebody who's in the workplace. Some of these things you may know about, some of them could be new to you. All of them are concerning to us, as our entire lives, our banking, our personal lives, our medical history, everything is online now. I'm reminded of how much the scope and depth of the internet is. I had worked in the past as a consultant for the Boeing company. They make airplanes, of course. And someone told me at Boeing that they have scanned onto an intranet that people can get access to that own Boeing planes or work on Boeing planes. On every plane that Boeing has built since the World War II, you can download the blueprints, the schematics, the mechanics guides and things like that that you need for every airplane that Boeing has ever built. So think about all the planes in the sky that have a B in front of them and that are Boeing planes. And since the war, World War II till now, you can get access to those. So the internet, a magical, extraordinary place to gather and transfer data and information and fun stuff, and also a lot of dangerous things as well. So let's talk about them. When you look at cybersecurity, one of the first things that comes up is the concept of malware. And malware is malicious software. That is software that has been installed on your personal computer, or maybe even on your phone, or on your professional computer in the workplace. And the design is to redirect information that you put into, so bad guys can get access to your keystrokes. With your keystrokes, they can figure out how to decipher your password. You can get malware that installs video programs onto your computers. We've seen this happen on many occasions where they turn on your camera in some kind of remote way. So malware is malicious software, and this is put on oftentimes through very harmless ways. You click on a link, you think it's something that's coming from your kids or a friend of yours, and they've passed on a virus to you through their email system as well. So we'll talk about that. Second is a concept called backdoor. And backdoor is where the software creators and the hardware users and programmers and people that write code have created entree points that go around the normal security process. And it is the goal of these hackers, these cyber attackers, cyber terrorists that we'll be talking about, to get in through the back door and find ways to insert code or software into malicious software into the system itself. So the challenge with backdoor issues with cybersecurity is that sometimes these creators, the people that write the code, have to have ways to go in and out of the program that is different than the actual end user. And as a result, they have these doors open that literally these crooks come into. So we have DDoS or DOS, denial of service, or distributed denial of service. And DOS or DDoS attacks are where they attempt to shut down a specific website. They do this frequently against the United States government, especially foreign countries that hate us. And also it may come from some hacker that wants to shut down a fairly large site like an Amazon or a Netflix or something like that. But oftentimes these denial of services or distributed denial of service attacks will try to hammer a specific website from somebody just to do it maliciously, not because they have any intent to shut down Netflix or Apple or anything like that, but they just want to do it to harm people that are trying to run a business, or their website is their only means of getting out to their customers, and so they will hack this and hammer it so that it shuts down. We see brute force attacks. This is an attack that is usually done using a specific kind of software which tries to get people's passwords. So you see a lot of conversation these days about how long should your password be. And again, the sweet spot for passwords tends to be about 12 symbols or letters in combination, and typically not a word. So if you were to say, what is the phrase, I like Steve Albrecht, you would take the letter I, you would take the letter L, you would take the letter S and the letter A, and that would be the start of the sentence that you use. And so can you create a 12-word sentence? My dog has brown fur and black fleas, and I love him anyway. And that is the sentence that you use. You take the first letter from each one. You add some numbers that are specific to your memory. You add things like exclamation points or ampersands or something like that, that you can make this 12 symbols or 12 letters, as complicated as it can be, for these what are called dictionary attacks, where these software hackers will go after your password using these programs that attempt to try every possible combination. You say, how is that even possible that they could do this? Well, they have very powerful servers, and these servers work to be able to process millions of possibilities and combinations for passwords till they get yours. It's actually pretty easy to do if you have the right kind of software. So these dictionary attacks, these password breakers, they'll try to generate as many randomly created words or passwords to find out which one is yours. And then when you look at passwords in general, the most disturbing thing in our country, and this may be true in other countries, but certainly here, is that password is the most common password in the United States, which is ridiculous. And password 1234 or 1234567, something like that, is the most common password. So certainly these hackers can find this stuff out pretty quick when they do these brute force attacks. There's something called a logic bomb, and a logic bomb is when the hackers will create something that will go off as a piece of software that connects to a certain time of the year. So they may pick a denial of service attack or some kind of hacking attack that is designed to disrupt a certain business over the Christmas holidays, like an Amazon type of thing, or going after a foreign government or a United States government, where they try to hack a certain chunk of our database systems, our network systems, to destroy them with a bomb that has been in place maybe 3 months ago into the code, into the software drivers themselves, that'll go off in some way that will crash the whole system. And so when you look at these things, they're typically done when we get in through the backdoor area, we get in through these open areas that the code writers have created. So one of the challenges that we face in these situations is that sometimes you will get what seems like a harmless or innocent phone call from somebody, and it sounds like it's someone who works for your IT department, and they may identify themselves as somebody, and they're not. And you say, what are you calling about? And they say, well, we're doing a little test here of our systems, and we just need your password. Can you tell me your password so I can verify what you have? Well, some people do this without thinking about it. I mean, most people like me are suspicious about such things. I would say, come to my office and stand in front of me and identify yourself and do that, and then I will. I also say, well, shouldn't you have my password on file anyway if you're in IT? And that's usually the way that we can verify it's actually a true thing. The other part is that people will do these things based on clicking on links that seem like they go to some sort of popular website or something that relates to their bank or something that's linked to some entertainment site like TMZ or People Magazine or something like that. And that's actually created by the hackers as well. So we see a couple things. One is called phishing. Phishing is a very common attack. It's social engineering messages that come from emails, from sites that seem like they could be your bank or a website that's connected to you. It's not Amazon, but it's Amazon spelled with an S instead of a Z. And you click on this, and it asks for information about can you reconfirm your credit card? We're having trouble processing it, and you put that in, and then there you go. So spear phishing attacks. These are narrowly targeted. They may be created in software to look like it came from your bank or some other internal thing to get you to respond to a network request. One of the things I do in these situations myself, when I get a fair amount, is I will see a website that comes from something I use. And then when I click on the reply, it'll have a bunch of letters and numbers and symbols, and it'll say something like, RS for Russia or RZ or something like that in the email address. The country it came from, you can look up, and it's not connected to my bank or not connected to anything else. So when you look at some of these phishing and spear phishing attacks, these crooks are pretty good at creating email addresses and email response addresses that really almost match what you're attempting to do. I used to get a lot of these from American Express. They weren't really from American Express. And you can also tell because oftentimes these hackers have really poor English skills, and there'll be typos and grammatical mistakes and things that you can tell did not come from this country. It's not a legitimate source coming from Bank of America or American Express or Visa or MasterCard. Ransomware is something that's really become quite popular these days. This is the hacker's ability to hold hostage a chunk of the internal network system that a government or a business uses. We've seen it a lot in government where they attack the payroll systems. There was a famous case in San Francisco involving the now governor of California, Gavin Newsom, where there was a disgruntled employee, and before he was fired, he closed down or took control through ransomware of the city of San Francisco's payroll systems. He was in jail. They arrested him, and he demanded to meet with the mayor of San Francisco, who was Governor Newsom at that time. And Newsom went to the jail and said, okay, you've had your meeting. Give me the code so we can unbreak this padlock, this electronic padlock that you have put over top of our payroll system so we can pay our employees for the city of San Francisco. And that's what happened to him. So the guy went to jail for this extortion process that these ransomware attackers use. So if they get in through some way, through phishing or ransomware software or through the backdoor methods, and they can get control of certain parts of the network system, they will hold it hostage, and they will say, pay us in Bitcoin, pay us in untraceable digital dollars, whatever it happens to be, and then we'll give you your system back. And it's sort of ironic that sometimes in very complex cases, the FBI, and this is odd to me, would say, well, go ahead and pay the ransom because it seems faster than us trying to help you either catch these people or help you dismantle and reinstall all the software that you have. And so there have been cases where companies and public sector, private sector organizations have paid the ransom and got ownership of their own programs back again. And not surprisingly, there are times where they paid the ransom and didn't get these things back again. And so they threw their money after these crooks, and the crooks didn't comply. And so from my perspective, as a guy who's chased bad guys since he was 21 years old, I always say, don't pay the ransom. It just encourages more of the same. I understand why people do it to get back to business, but my argument would be have better software and hardware protection programs, protocols, policies, devices. Train your employees not to reveal information and to give up things in place before these things happen, and have a redundant system, backup system, a system of redundancy where your files, even if they are hacked, would only be lost for, say, 12 hours or 24 hours because you're back saving it, backing it up and saving it in some sort of cloud-based platform, which they can't get access to. And even if you did lose 1 day's worth of business, it would be 1 day's worth of business instead of your entire system. So one of the things I do as part of my work is site security surveys of government buildings, libraries, schools, K through 12, colleges and universities, I've done aerospace organizations. I've done utilities, electric, water, things like that, libraries. And when I do the site security survey, since I'm not an IT guy by training, one of my challenges is to talk to the IT manager, the Department of IT or IS, Information Services, and say, what do you have in place? What robust systems do you have in place to prevent ransomware, to help stop phishing attacks, to help stop these backdoor hacks that are done by these crooks? What do you have in place in terms of software and hardening of the target for the entire network system itself? And I can only go by their word. I can only go by their explanation to me and their promise to me that they have the right programs and software and guards, electronic physical guards in place to prevent this from happening. So one of the ways these people get into our systems is through social engineering, through emails and through sometimes phone calls. And they're pretty brazen. And they'll call up and they'll say that I'm from the IT department, or they'll call up and say I'm from your bank. You can imagine this works really well on people that are trusting, like our seniors. And so these crooks will get access to a senior's telephone number and say, your credit card didn't go through. We need to verify, what the payment is and the PIN number and this and that. And can you give us the 3-digit code in the back? And these seniors who don't always understand the complexities of the IT world will gladly do these things because they think they're helping. And so we have to say to our seniors, be suspicious. Be not as trusting as you might be with somebody who's a family member, as opposed to some stranger who calls and says, I need to verify this information. So we've seen seniors pay their electric bill twice because they pay it once to the electric company, and then somebody else calls up and says, hey, you owe $150 here and we need to process this. We've seen seniors get scammed on situations where the person says, you got a jury duty notice and there's a fine and you have to pay the fine, or otherwise you're going to go to jail. I mean, these crooks have no mercy, and a special place in hell for them going after our seniors with these social engineering attacks. So when you look at the things that are concerning us in terms of the web, and the internet is a powerful, wonderful thing, except when it's not. It's child pornography being a huge issue, human trafficking being a huge issue, the distribution of illegal narcotics being a huge issue over the web, and then certainly things related to the financial structure of this country being in jeopardy of being hacked or held hostage in terms of these ransomware things. So two types of webs that you may hear about besides the regular web. There's the deep web, and then there's the dark web. The dark web is part of the deep web, and the deep web is that part of the internet which is not indexed or controlled by Google or other search engines. Oftentimes it's where cyber criminals do their work in terms of exchanging stolen identities, credit cards and names and social security numbers, things like that. And certainly it's where people exchange child pornography. They also use the dark web as a place where inside the deep web, where you have to have special software to be able to get into the dark web or into the deep web. And one of those pieces of software is something called steganography. Steganography is a concept that came from the Greeks or the Romans, some of those cats back in the days of togas and whatnot, where they used invisible photographs that were covered by other photographs. And when you removed the top photograph or the top design, it would reveal the message. So if you ever messed around as a kid with lemon juice to make invisible ink, I'm not sure the recipe for that, but I'm sure it's online. That's a concept called steganography. Well, the way steganography works with child pornography or other types of terrorist information, things like that, is that someone will send a photograph which is overlaid on top of another photograph. So let's say we have a child pornography photograph which is overlaid with a picture of, flowers or trees. The person on the receiving end has the key, which is the key to unlock or remove the top photograph of the flowers or the trees and get to the one that they want. That's what steganography is. You can imagine that steganography is not easy to capture or track. There are software programs to create steganography covers, the keys that people pass back and forth between each other, which is very difficult for law enforcement and the IT specialists to get their hands on in terms of investigating these cases. So when we look at the dark web, the deep web, these places where hackers live, where child pornography people exchange information, where terrorists live, this is a pretty dangerous and difficult part of our world to secure. So let's talk a little bit about another one of my biggest concerns for hacking and cyber attacks is in the concept of workplace violence. And you say, well, how are these two related? Well, let's start from the beginning. since the creation in, I would say, the late 90s, when I started in the subject in the early 90s, of a list of 4 types of perpetrators of workplace violence, we would have 4 categories that security, law enforcement, prosecutors, practitioners, people like me who specialize in threat assessment and threat management would look at these types of perpetrators based on their interactions with the organization. So category 1, or type 1 workplace violence perpetrator, is crooks, criminals. They have no connection to the organization. They come in to rob or steal, threaten to harm the people that work there. A gas station robbery, a jewelry store robbery, the robbery of a pharmacy, something like that would be a criminal workplace violence act. A crook who does a drive-by shooting into a business, who has no connection to it at all, would be a criminal activity. Category 2 perpetrator would be people who are receiving services or products from organizations and threaten or harm or kill people that are providing those services. So this is taxpayers, it's customers, it's visitors, it's students, it's patients, it's passengers, people that ride buses and taxi cabs and subways, it's patients in hospitals and healthcare facilities, it's students in the K through 12 and college environment. It is taxpayers. It is people who have a connected relationship to the organization and they harm the people that provide services to them. This is somebody who shoots up City Hall when they're angry about a zoning or tax issue. This is somebody who shoots up a school, or somebody who takes a gun to a bus or a subway, somebody who harms the person who's giving them the services. So customers, students, patients, passengers, that type of thing. Category 3 perpetrators, and this is the one the news media thinks is the most prevalent, is current or former employees. So this is an employee who works for the organization who comes back and shoots people or runs them over with a car or attacks them with a knife, or an ex-employee, or even an applicant who was turned down for employment has come back and done these types of workplace violence cases. Another ones that most people think about in the news media. 4th category is a shadow issue and a disturbing one, which is domestic violence involving an employee. And oftentimes we don't discover these cases until the perpetrator is standing in the lobby or has made his way back into the facility, the factory, the warehouse, the store, whatever it happens to be, and in some cases the school, the classroom, I've seen that, and injures or kills the person that he used to have a love or dating or marriage relationship with. In California, where I came from, the Senate Bill 400 is a signed legislation which says if you have an employee who has a domestic violence issue, you cannot fire that person. You cannot terminate them for being an employee with a DV issue. And also, and this is the second part of Senate Bill 400, which is critical, is as an employer, you have to create a safety plan for this person at work, not at home, but at work. And to say, if this person is subject to contact at our front counters or at our store counter or something like that, we have to move this person or come up with other security devices, guards, policies to protect this person at work. And so not every state has that, which is surprising to me. I think about 13 or 15 states do and the others do not. But in most states, if you're a domestic violence victim, you can be fired for having a DV issue. And that's a problem because then people don't report what's going on. And if you're a woman listening to what I'm talking about, every woman knows when someone says, if I can't have you, nobody else can, those guys are super dangerous. And so category 4, domestic violence, is a shadow issue because we don't have full reporting oftentimes. We'll certainly hear about the homicides in these cases, but not necessarily the other incidents that happen that don't involve homicide, but are still workplace violence. So here's the deal. We have these 4 categories. Type 1, crooks. Type 2, customers or patients, passengers, students. Type 3, current or former employee. Type 4, domestic violence involving an employee. I would argue, and here's my thought process here, that we need a 5th category. Category 5 would be cyber crimes, cyber threats, cyber attacks. Because here's what's happening for these situations in our country, and it is disturbing to me when we look at where this is happening, is when we see these people go after healthcare. And so I have a case here in Brooklyn, New York. It says here, the headline, Brooklyn Hospital Network reverts to paper medical charts for several weeks after a cyber attack. And this happened in December of 2022. The Brookdale University Hospital Medical Center, Interfaith Medical Center, and Kingsbrook Jewish Medical Centers were hacked by somebody. And as a result, they had to work off of paper, no more electronic exchange of medical files and medical patients' information, because the cyber system was attacked, and said, now, of course, the hospital says no patients were adversely affected, but 80% of the computer stations at the one Brooklyn Health Center, their hospitals, were shut down. And so they'd not said whether it was a ransom or whether the ransomware was paid, but there's lots of other examples where healthcare systems have been attacked by these types of situations. So imagine that you're in a healthcare environment, or your loved one is, and their computer system goes down, and that's how they keep track of surgical scheduling and surgical records and medical records and how much dosage of medications and things they give to patients. This is a life-threatening, severe issue, and that's why I'm making the argument for the fifth category of workplace violence to be cyber. Not necessarily somebody involving a gun or a knife, but somebody using a keyboard to shut down a healthcare system, or, and I'll talk about it in a second, a utility. When we look at this other one here, this happened in October. This is an attack in Common Spirit Health Systems, the second largest U.S. nonprofit hospital chain in the country. They have 140 hospitals and 1,000 care centers in 21 states. Facilities in Iowa, Nebraska, Tennessee, and Washington were among those disrupted. And this was across the healthcare system for Common Spirit Healthcare. They had a ransomware attack here, and it shut down a good chunk of their operating systems. And so they had to go to paper systems. They had to divert ambulances. They had certainly records that were compromised. They had difficulty interpreting X-rays and CT scans and things like this. So this happened in October of this year. It is a serious situation when we have these hackers going after our healthcare. Now, the last one I want to think about, and this is probably just as frightening as the healthcare one, at least for me, from a security perspective, is what is happening to our power grids. So we have had incidents in North Carolina recently and in Washington State recently where these crooks have physically gone in and disabled the power grid stations, the substations, transfer stations, power stations, where we have transfer devices from grid to grid, and shut it down so that people are without power. Well, imagine that all the things that power runs that is life-threatening, life-critical. We're talking about backup generators for people in healthcare. We're talking about backup generators so people don't freeze to death in their homes. We're talking about one critical to me, since I live on a property that has a well, which is no electricity means no water, right? Can't pump the well water into my house. And so besides heat and refrigeration and all the obvious things, water is a big concern for me. So when you look at all the utilities, I can't say all, but a lot of utilities use a software system called SCADA, or some version of a SCADA system. That's an acronym, SCADA, for how they operate wastewater treatment facilities, water treatment facilities, electrical power plants, things like that. These public utilities are susceptible to being hacked by these hackers who can get into these SCADA systems and shut them down. And so one of the things I'm always baffled by when I think about hacking in general and the social engineering process and these backdoor attacks and how one person's failure at one key junction in the IT system can lead somebody in to get all this information is the use of password managers. And so you may be subscribing to a password management service that's online. You may be have an app on your phone that stores all your passwords. And it strikes me as not the best way to do it, because if it gets hacked, there's all your passwords. And they always say, well, we don't get hacked. We have really strong systems in place and preventions and guards. And then, there's Twitter got hacked to the tune of 250 million Twitter addresses and personal information that people use to apply for their Twitter handle. So if you look and say Twitter got hacked and hotel chains get hacked and airlines get hacked and all kinds of places do, why would these password management companies, who I don't know who they are, they just, they come up with a piece of software, an app for your phone to be able to store or save all your passwords? This seems like a way to put your stuff out there to be in jeopardy. And so I'm not saying you have to memorize everything, but if you write stuff down in such a way where people could look at it and not figure out what site it goes to. So oftentimes I will write down in my password book I'll just write down a few letters to remind me what the rest of the password is. All I need is the beginning part, and I know what the rest of it is. Or I'll use initials instead of sentences to figure out what my password is if I need to look at it later on. So these password management systems make me concerned. So if you go back to the healthcare issues, you go back to the SCADA systems that are in these electrical or water utility facilities, and these things are taken hostage in these ransomware attacks by these crooks, it is a big concern. This, for me, makes the workplace violence category 5 a logical, necessary one to say that we need to go after these people and pay attention to how we protect our systems. It is more complex than ever before, and it is more necessary than ever before. Okay, well, now for one of my favorite parts of the show, it's time for my Crime Time Stupidest Crook of the Week. I love to talk about stupid crooks here. I have one here which the headline says, "This woman was caught orange-handed," which makes me laugh. She broke into a house in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The house was occupied by a woman with 2 kids. She saw this woman pry off the window and get inside her house. Apparently, she found a bag of Cheetos in the kitchen and a bottle of water, which she helped herself to. The police came. They caught her as she was leaving the facility or leaving the house. She had the orange Cheeto crumbs stuck in her teeth, and so she was caught orange-handed or orange-toothed, as the case may be. So Tulsa, Oklahoma burglar was caught with Cheeto dust on her face. They got the empty bag in the kitchen, and they got the Cheeto dust on her face outside, and they put 2 and 2 together and arrested her for burglary. So that's my stupidest crook of the week. We get to talk about some of our dumbest criminals who managed to get themselves arrested based on their monumental stupidity, and there are no shortage of these. Okay. Let's take our Crime Time crime quiz. Let us use our Crime Time IQ points here today to figure out our Crime Time quiz question. Who are the Shadow Wolves? Shadow Wolves. Who are the Shadow Wolves? Well, the Shadow Wolves are a Native American tactical patrol unit assigned to the Homeland Security investigations. They work in Sells, S-E-L-L-S, Sells, Arizona, and they're on an Indian reservation called the Tohono O'odham Nation. The name Shadow Wolves refers to the way the unit hunts like a wolf pack. The Shadow Wolves investigators, the cops, and their uniformed armed officers that work for Homeland Security, specialize in the interdiction of human smuggling and drug smuggling through the rugged terrain of the Sonoran Desert. And you can find this at Homeland Security. If you put in Shadow Wolves, you'll see their website. The Sonoran Desert, utilizing both technology and the traditional art of human trafficking. Despite the use of high-tech equipment, the unit relies on its ability to track it and using a technique called cutting for sign, which includes any physical evidence left by drug smugglers, footprints, tire tracks, clothing, damaged plants and vegetation, things like that, dirt. This elite unit was established by congressional mandate in 1974 in response to drug smuggling in Indian nations in the United States, Indian reservations. The Shadow Wolves are the Department of Homeland Security's only Native American tracking unit, especially utilizing this targeted interdiction tracking specialties. They cover 2.8 million acres, including a 76-mile stretch of land shared on the border of Mexico. The Shadow Wolves are a key component of the Native American Targeted Investigations of Violent Enterprises, or NATIVE Task Force, a high-intensity drug trafficking area formed in 2013 to disrupt and dismantle drug trafficking organizations moving in and around Indian reservation areas. So they work with the Indian Police Departments, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Drug Enforcement Administration, and the U.S. Bureau of Land Management. So they are a special agent category. They work for the federal government as special agents. So that is who the Shadow Wolves are. This week's crime safety tip has to do with your credit card. And think about how many times you hand your credit card to a stranger at the pizza place, at a restaurant. You hand your credit card to anybody who's a clerk or somebody working in a retail counter, a hotel, anywhere, and they step away with it and you don't always see where it's going. That's kind of a concern. But the second part is, think about the number of times you may be at a place where you are getting your credit card out and you're holding it. Keep it covered. Keep it in your pocket, keep it in your purse, keep it in your wallet till the last possible second. Keep it covered with your hand, because there are people that can use their phones to take photographs of you from a distance. There are people that you can use cameras to take photographs or video from a distance and blow up the screen and figure out your card number. This happens at gas stations, I've seen. So make sure you cover your credit card physically with your hand so that people don't see any of the data that's on it. And the other part is there are a number of software programs out there that and apps on people's phones that can hack your credit card as it is being used and sort of suck up some of your information from thin air. And this creates the use of devices that can block RFID, radio frequency ID software, and that you have embedded into your wallet or embedded into your purse. So go into Amazon and look for RFID prevention wallets, purses, backpacks, things like that, where you can put your credit card information in a safe place without it being hacked from a distance. So that's this week's crime time safety tip. Okay, so thanks for your time and attention today. You can always reach me at my website, crimetimeradio.com. You can send me an email, connect with me on Twitter at Dr. Steve Albrecht, or LinkedIn at Dr. Steve Albrecht as well. You can always find past episodes of the show on YouTube. In our world, there are sheep and shepherds and wolves. Too many people are sheep and too few people are shepherds. There are a lot of wolves out there. There are not enough police officers, not enough sheriff's deputies to protect us all. So you need to be a shepherd. Take care of yourself, protect your family, your loved ones, your friends, your co-workers. Pay attention and be prepared to defend yourself with legal force if necessary. Be a good witness for the police if you see a crime. Stay safe and aware and alert at home, at work, at school, and even on the road. Thanks for listening to Crime Time. I'm Steve Albrecht, and thanks for listening to what I know is right.